A woman who spent her 20s and early 30s chasing something else suddenly says she's ready to build a real future with you. Before you take that at face value, ask yourself one question. Did she arrive at that decision, or did she run out of other options and land on it? The two look identical from the outside. They are not the same thing, and confusing them is one of the most expensive mistakes a man can make. This is Robbin, and this is the Honest Ledger. Today we're breaking down how to actually read the difference between genuine readiness and circumstantial urgency, what real biology is doing on her timeline, what behavioral signals actually tell you the truth, and how to protect what you're owed in a relationship to be genuinely wanted, not just eventually settled for. One thing needs to be said plainly, and I'll say it once. This isn't about writing women off or refusing commitment altogether. It's about you doing the same due diligence for the biggest decision of your life that you do for any other major commitment, with your eyes open, not your hope doing the negotiating for you. Let's open the ledger. The first entry in the ledger is the biology itself, because you need the real numbers before anything else here makes sense. Female fertility doesn't decline in a straight, gentle line. It drops off a shelf. Natural per-cycle pregnancy odds sit somewhere around 20 to 25% in the mid-20s, fall to roughly 15% by the mid-30s, and drop into the single digits by the early 40s, with miscarriage risk and pregnancy complications climbing at the same time. That's not something anyone made up to scare you. It's basic reproductive medicine, and it means that a woman approaching this deadline is often operating under real, biological time pressure that has nothing to do with how she feels about you specifically. What this means for you is simple. When you see sudden urgency around commitment, you owe it to yourself to figure out how much of that urgency is about the calendar and how much of it is about the man standing in front of her. On the ledger, her timeline pressure is real, but real pressure and real desire for you specifically are two different columns, and you're entitled to know which one you're actually being offered. That distinction is the entire spine of this video, so hold on to it. Everything else here is really just a set of tools for telling those two columns apart in your actual specific situation. The second entry is watching how she responds when you set a normal, healthy pace instead of the pace she's pushing for. A woman who's genuinely ready for you specifically will tolerate reasonable pacing. She'll let trust build the way trust actually builds over shared time and real experience because she's confident the outcome will hold either way. A woman under pure timeline pressure often can't tolerate that pace because time is the enemy and slowing down feels like risk. Watch what happens when you say you want to take things at a normal speed. Exclusivity after real dating, meeting family after real time invested, cohabitation and marriage conversations only once you've actually seen each other through some real friction. If that request is met with genuine patience, that's a good sign. If it's met with pressure, manufactured distance, or escalating urgency every time you ask for normal pacing, that tells you something important about what's actually driving the relationship. On the ledger, your right to set a pace that protects you and her actual reaction to that boundary, which is one of the most honest pieces of information you'll get in the entire courtship. Pay attention specifically to what happens the moment you hold that pace under pressure. Plenty of people can be patient when patience costs them nothing. The real test is whether that patience survives you actually saying no to something she wants sooner than you're ready to give it. The third entry is how she handles honest, ordinary questions about her past. You're not owed a forensic audit of anyone's dating history, and you shouldn't go digging like a prosecutor. But a woman who's genuinely secure with where she's been will generally answer normal, reasonable questions about her relationship history without treating the question itself as an attack. Watch for the difference between, "I'd rather not get into the details, but I'm happy to talk about what I learned," and outright evasiveness, redirection, or turning the question back on you as evidence of your own insecurity. Reasonable curiosity about someone you're planning a life with is not control. If ordinary questions consistently get met with defensiveness disproportionate to what was actually asked, that's data worth taking seriously, not something to talk yourself out of because you don't want to seem paranoid. On the ledger, your right to actually know the person you're committing to and her willingness or unwillingness to let you. A man who lets a pattern of evasiveness slide because he doesn't want to seem like the difficult one is trading real information for short-term comfort, and that's a trade that tends to cost far more later than it saves now. It's worth being fair here, too. Nervousness about sharing a painful past is different from stonewalling. And a woman who gets emotional discussing something genuinely difficult isn't automatically hiding something. The distinction is whether the emotion resolves into an actual answer eventually, or whether it's used consistently as a way to end the conversation entirely. The fourth entry is consistency, whether the values and behaviors she's showing you now actually match how she operates when she's not actively trying to win your commitment. This is one of the most reliable filters available to you, and it takes time, which is exactly why rushing a decision works against you. Does she talk about wanting a certain kind of partnership, and do her actual friendships, habits, and daily choices track with that over months, not just words offered across a dinner table? Does the version of her you're seeing hold up consistently, or does it noticeably shift depending on who's watching? You don't need to build a case file. You just need to pay attention over enough time that a real pattern has the chance to show itself, instead of committing off a few months of someone's best behavior. On the ledger, real character, which only reveals itself through time and consistency, not through declarations made early and often. Anyone can say the right things in month 1. What you're actually looking for is whether the same person shows up in month 6, in month 10, under stress, around people she's not trying to impress, because that version of her is the one you'll actually be married to. This is also exactly why rushing works against you specifically, and why urgency from the other side should make you want more time to observe, not less. The faster a decision gets pushed, the less consistency data you actually have to work with when you make it. The fifth entry is what actual research says about relationship history and long-term stability, because this deserves a straight answer instead of either extreme, not the exaggerated deterministic claim that a long dating history guarantees failure, and not the dismissal that history never matters at all. Some research, including work by sociologist Nicholas Wolfinger analyzing national survey data, has found associations between a higher number of past sexual or romantic partners before marriage and somewhat elevated divorce risk on average. Though the research in this area is genuinely mixed, sample-dependent, and shows real complexity, including findings that the relationship isn't simply linear and that other factors like age at commitment and relationship skill matter enormously alongside it. Treat this as one data point worth knowing, not a verdict on any individual you're actually dating. What it means practically is that relationship history is worth factoring into your overall picture, alongside everything else you're actually observing about this specific person, rather than either ignored entirely or treated as an automatic disqualifier. On the ledger, information worth having, weighed honestly alongside everything else, not the whole case on its own. The mistake to avoid in either direction is treating one data point as destiny, either dismissing relationship history as irrelevant because it's uncomfortable to think about, or treating it as an automatic disqualifier that lets you skip the actual work of getting to know the specific woman in front of you. Data points describe populations. You're not marrying a population, you're marrying one specific person, and the research is a starting frame for your attention, not a substitute for actually paying it. The sixth entry is what I'd call the timing test, and it's one of the sharpest tools you have. Ask yourself honestly, did her interest in real partnership and family start showing up while she still had abundant options? Or did it arrive specifically once her preferred options started drying up? That's not always answerable with certainty, and you shouldn't turn it into an interrogation, but it's worth paying attention to the honest version of her own story, if she tells it. A woman who says plainly, I spent my 20s focused on other things, and I understand now what that cost me, and I'm choosing differently with open eyes, is telling you something very different from a woman who insists nothing about her situation changed, and this was always the plan, when the timeline doesn't actually support that. On the ledger, the difference between an honest account of a shift in priorities and a performance of one, and you're entitled to notice which you're getting. This test isn't foolproof on its own. Timing alone can be coincidental. But combined with everything else in this ledger, it adds real weight to the overall picture, rather than standing alone as a verdict. The seventh entry is protecting your own investment while you're doing all of this, financially, emotionally, and in terms of your own time, which is not an unlimited resource either. Due diligence isn't just about reading her correctly, it's about not handing over major, hard-to-reverse commitments, cohabitation, engagement, marriage, children, faster than the evidence actually supports, no matter how much urgency is being generated around you. A man who slows down to verify what he's actually being offered isn't being cold. He's protecting the biggest financial and emotional commitment he'll likely make in his life, the same way he'd protect any decision of that size. On the ledger, your own resources, worth guarding with exactly as much care as you'd want applied to hers. This includes more than money. Your time, your emotional bandwidth, and the years you could be spending building something real with someone genuinely matched to you are all finite. And every year spent verifying a mismatch is a year not spent building the actual life you're trying to build. The eighth entry is remembering what you're actually entitled to want, because a lot of this conversation can start to feel like a threat detection exercise instead of what it's actually about. You deserve to be genuinely chosen, not settled for by default because someone's other options disappeared. That's not an unreasonable standard. It's the baseline for any relationship worth building a life around. If everything you observe over real time, consistency, honest handling of her own history, patience with a normal pace, a genuine account of her own growth, actually holds up, that's worth taking seriously as real readiness. If it doesn't hold up under that same honest observation, you're allowed to walk away without guilt, regardless of how much urgency or pressure is coming at you to stay. On the ledger, this is the entry that actually matters most, not proving she's lying, but confirming honestly whether what's being offered is real, and only moving forward once it is. The eighth entry is comparing how she talks about past relationships to how she actually treats you day to day, because the contrast between those two things tells you more than either one alone. Notice whether she references past partners with lingering warmth, nostalgia, or unresolved energy, while treating the actual relationship in front of her with more criticism and less enthusiasm than you'd expect from someone genuinely happy to be there. That contrast, if it's present, is worth naming directly rather than quietly absorbing. On the other hand, a woman who talks about her past with real ownership, what she wanted then, what she understands differently now, and treats you with consistent warmth and appreciation is giving you a very different, much more encouraging signal. On the ledger, the comparison between how someone talks about what they left behind and how they treat what's actually in front of them, which is a comparison worth making honestly rather than avoiding because it feels uncomfortable to look at directly. It's worth being fair here too. Everyone carries some residue from past relationships, and the occasional wistful comment isn't evidence of anything on its own. What matters is the pattern over time, not any single remark taken out of context. The ninth entry is getting an outside perspective because you are, by definition, the person least equipped to see this clearly on your own. Emotional investment distorts judgment. That's not a weakness specific to you, it's just how attachment works for anyone. A close friend or family member who genuinely has your interests at heart, who isn't invested in the relationship succeeding or failing for their own reasons, can often see a pattern in a matter of weeks that takes you months to admit to yourself, simply because they're not the one hoping it works out. Picture a man who dismisses a friend's concern early on because he doesn't want to hear it, only to look back a year later and realize the friend had noticed the exact pattern he eventually had to face himself. What this costs you. If you skip this step is time, sometimes a lot of it, spent working through a realization that someone close to you could have helped you reach much sooner. On the ledger, a second set of eyes worth genuinely listening to even when what they're seeing isn't what you want to hear. The goal isn't to outsource the decision to someone else. It's yours to make either way. But a second, less emotionally entangled perspective is one of the cheapest, most effective checks available to you. And most men skip it entirely because admitting they might need it feels like admitting weakness. It isn't. It's the same reason professionals get second opinions on major decisions in every other part of life. Add it all up and here's the full ledger. What careful, honest observation gets you, an accurate read on how much of her urgency is timeline versus genuine desire for you specifically. Real information from how she handles a normal pace. Real information from how she handles honest questions about her past. A read on consistency that only time can actually provide, an honest, non-hysterical accounting of what relationship history research actually says, a timing test that separates real growth from circumstantial pressure, your own resources protected while you gather all of this. A clear-eyed comparison between how she talks about the past and how she treats the present, and a second set of eyes that can see what your own attachment makes hard to see. And underneath all of it, the standard you're entitled to hold, genuinely chosen, not settled for. Now, here's what you actually do with this. First, set your own pace and hold it, regardless of how much urgency you're getting pushed toward you. A relationship worth having survives a reasonable timeline. One that can't is telling you something. Second, ask direct, reasonable questions about her past and her reasons for wanting commitment now, calmly and without apology, and pay close attention to how those questions are received, not just how they're answered. The tone of the response often tells you more than the content does. Third, watch consistency over months, not weeks. Anyone can maintain a performance for a matter of weeks. Very few people can maintain a false one for the better part of a year without cracks showing, especially once real stress or real friction enters the picture. Fourth, know the real fertility numbers so you're operating from facts instead of vague anxiety, and factor that timeline honestly into your own decision-making without letting it override everything else you're actually observing about the person in front of you. Facts calm the guessing game down. Vague anxiety just amplifies it. Fifth, don't confuse guilt with evidence. If you feel pressured to move faster than your own judgment supports, that pressure is information in itself, worth naming directly rather than pushing past it to avoid an uncomfortable conversation. And sixth, hold the actual standard you're entitled to. You deserve someone who wants you specifically, not someone who arrived at you by elimination. Don't talk yourself out of that standard because you're tired of being alone or because you've already invested time. Sunk time is not a reason to ignore what you're actually seeing. Seventh, compare how she talks about her past to how she treats you in the present, honestly and without flinching from what you notice. That contrast is one of the clearest signals available to you, and it's easy to look past precisely because it hurts to look at directly. And eighth, bring at least one trusted person outside the relationship into the picture and actually listen to what they see. You're too close to this to be your only source of judgment. And the people who genuinely have your interests at heart are often the ones who notice the pattern first. None of this is about assuming the worst going in. It's about refusing to hand over your future on hope alone, when the evidence is actually available to you if you're willing to look at it honestly and take the time to gather it. So here's my question for you, and I want something specific in the comments. Have you had to run this kind of read on someone's urgency before, and what actually told you whether it was real? This has been Robbin for The Honest Ledger, the channel that reads the fine print nobody hands you. If this gave you a clearer way to tell the difference between being chosen and being settled for, that's exactly why this channel exists. Subscribe if you want the rest of the ledger opened up, one entry at a time.